All right, so it's going to be a review of Transformers 1. It's the newest Transformers movie directed by Josh Cooley, starring Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree Henry. It's basically just an origin story for Optimus Prime and Megatron. They were friends at one point. They had their whole falling out or whatever. Then they become enemies like we know them to be. And the trailer didn't look all that great. It looked like it was for really young kids and wouldn't appeal to pretty much anybody else. And the comedy seemed very obvious and not all that great. But I decided to give it a chance. I went to go see it last night on Thursday, and I'll say how I feel about it in a second. So Orion Pax, played by Chris Hemsworth, he will become Optimus Prime, and D16, played by Brian Tyree Henry, he will become Megatron. They're best friends. They're miners on Iacon, which is a city on Cybertron. They mine energon because the matrix of leadership, which caused the energon to flow freely throughout the planet, was lost. They're miners because they don't have a core, so they can't transform. So it's like pretty much that's all they can do. Orion Pax doesn't like that. He wants to be more than just a miner. So he wants to really help Sentinel Prime, who's the only Prime left, find the matrix of leadership. And that keeps constantly getting him and D16 in trouble. So they end up, along with Alita 1, played by Scarlett Johansson, and B127, basically Bumblebee, played by Keegan-Michael Key, they end up on the surface. And they end up finding the dead bodies of all the other primes and finding out what's really going on. There's something going on. They've pretty much been lied to, and so they end up taking the cores of the old primes, and they're deciding to tell everybody else about it and to do something about it. So positives. This movie looks really good, right? They make all the characters look and move like toys. Like they it's really cool the way they do it. Like when they start running and things like that, the way they kind of clank, it's almost like they're like toys and things like that. But along with that toy aspect of it, they're still able to be expressive in their faces, so they still feel alive, and they have a lot of character because they're able to still emote through their faces, and I thought that was really good. I mean, just visually, I thought it was pretty much great. Whenever they are on the surface and they go to these different areas on Cybertron, there's nice variation there, and they all look great. I think the performances are really good. Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael Key, I thought he was good, even though his character was annoying. A lot of the comedy they do with B, and the comedy in the movie just in general doesn't work most of the time, but especially with B, just doesn't shut up. We'll get back to the comedy though. But I think they were good. Definitely Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree Henry, I thought were the best, especially Brian Tyree Henry with what he has to do. I really like the friendship early on. I was like, okay, I feel this. This is a little cheesy, but no, I believe that these guys are close, and I like that aspect of it. And I guess maybe this goes along with the visuals, but the fight scenes, even though I didn't like some of the comedy happening with it, mostly would be the fight scenes were really cool. I like seeing all this different stuff that they can do, and once they get the core, they can actually transform and do stuff. And after you get over the comedy of them not knowing how to transform for a little bit, that isn't all that great. Once they're actually able to do stuff and fight, it was really cool. I definitely have negatives. The story is it's weak. I really think that it could have had some more drafts. It kind of feels like it was a script for something else, some other script that was sitting on a shelf somewhere, and then they repurposed it to be Transformers. It just doesn't feel like there was much thought process in making it feel special or anything like that. Like it has a lot of the same story beats, these obvious story beats that you've seen in other things. The comedy is every now and then the comedy will catch you off guard, but for the most part, I feel like a lot of the comedy doesn't work. Way too obvious. If you've seen the trailer and it was like, okay, these are obvious setups. That's what the movie's like. Something will happen in front of some characters. The shot will go back to them, and they'll start and they'll be running away. A character's like, oh, don't you better not have gotten me fired. And the other character's like, oh, you're not going to get fired. Immediately, the character comes down, you're fired. It's like, it's just obvious jokes. You can see them coming. You know the payoff immediately when the setup happens. D16 becoming Megatron, right? Eventually, he's going to have a falling out with Orion Pax, and him become the Megatron that we know. And he goes from being kind of normal. He has this buddy thing with Orion Pax to being not only aggressive, but really, really focused on murder. He really wants to kill this person in the movie. I'm trying not to spoil it, but I mean, it's obvious. It's pretty much obvious. All of this is obvious, but he really, really wants to kill this person now, and he's really aggressive. He's constantly like butting heads with Orion Pax, but like in a really forced way. You need to set this up better, right? Part of the the problem of pacing in this movie is just we need to keep moving, and we need him to become Megatron, so we need him to get it because you needed more development of him beforehand to show that that was already in there, and this is just it coming to the surface. Either that, or you needed to have it more of a gradual thing, and then by the end, it's like, oh no, I'm fucking killing this person. But they just kind of have it abruptly happen, and it gives you tonal whiplash too, because you have the whole thing with B never shutting up and having very obvious jokes that like seem like they're for young kids. um but then you go, the movie goes over to Megatron, and it's like a whole nother movie. It's like it's taking it real serious whenever it's on him after he has his switch, his flip. And I don't know, man. You needed more drafts. You needed to make that more believable, and you needed to give that more time, right? The pacing is just, it's, I barely ever say this, but it's too fast. It's too fast. There needed to be more in this movie as a whole, but especially with Megatron, with D16. All right, so I had issues with it. Its writing and its pacing and things like that, like I just said. The comedy just really didn't work. But overall, I thought it was all right. I had a good time with it. I like the action. I really like the way the movie looks and the way the characters are animated and all that. And I did enjoy the performances, especially Brian Tyree Henry, to the point where it definitely, I think, elevated it and made up for some of those issues I had with the characters, mainly with D16 Megatron. So I'm gonna give this a good enough, right? I didn't think I would. I thought I was gonna give this like at best a rental, looking at the trailer. But I had fun with it. I just wish it would have been more. I wish it would have had more. That's the thing, is it has potential that I don't think it reached because it just it didn't care to, I guess. It didn't feel like it needed to, or they didn't feel like it needed to. But anyway, yeah, that's Transformers 1. Good enough. Subscribe. We're done.